Hello students, welcome to Unit 2. We're going to be focused in this unit on Quadragesimo Anno by Pope Pius XI, written in 1931. In this particular video, we're going to look at the historical setting very briefly of this encyclical and then the principle of the universal destination of goods, a very important principle in this encyclical as well as in the rest of Catholic social teaching. This encyclical was published on May 15, 1931, 40 years to the day from the publication of Rerum Novarum, the great encyclical that began modern Catholic social teaching. This encyclical in some way started a trend so that on the 70th anniversary, 80th, 90th, 100th anniversaries of Rerum Novarum, you also have encyclicals published. Not everyone was exactly to the day, but at least to that year where it was an anniversary at a multiple of 10. May 15th then takes on an importance. I think we should have a little party on May 15th to celebrate Rerum Novarum. Remind me, and we can do that this year. Historical setting. What had changed? What had happened in the time between 1891 and 1931 that has influence on this encyclical? Well, one, communism had become a historical reality. In Russia, you had two revolutions in 1917, one that overthrew the Tsar, and then another in October that set up the communist Republic of Russia. Shortly thereafter, 5 years later, 1922, the USSR, which was a combination of different communist countries in that area of Asia and Eastern Europe, the USSR was formed in 1922. So communism now was a living reality, not just something on the pages of books and in people's discussion, but something that was already going on. Two, you have the Great Depression. Now, World War I was another huge event that happened between 1891 and 1931. And World War I is in some ways related to the Great Depression. After the end of the war, there was a boom, kind of an artificial economic boom in the United States as well as in other countries. In the 1920s, in the United States, people were speculating wildly. They were buying stocks with money that they didn't have, borrowing money to buy stocks. All of the boom and expansion came to a crashing halt, especially on Black Tuesday, October 29th, 1929. More than 16 million shares of stock were sold that day. Wall Street crashed, and not only the United States, but also the world, because economics are interconnected between countries, crashed into deep poverty. Soup kitchens, bread lines, people in line to try to get temporary work became common things because very many people were unemployed. In the United States, at its high point, more than 20% of workers were unemployed, didn't have anything to feed their families. And so the needs of the poor came to the forefront, were very easy to see, both in the United States and in Europe. And that is very clearly reflected in the focus on the poor in Quadragesimo Anno, and on the proper use of goods for the sake of the poor and for the whole common good in that same encyclical. And that brings us to the universal destination of goods, which is one of the central principles of Catholic social teaching. A note, when I talk about a principle, pay a special attention because the principles are the building blocks on which CST is built. Those are going to be the most important things in our discussions and in our work in Catholic social teaching. So this is one of those especially important things. The universal destination of goods means that all the things that exist, all the things that God has created, are created not just for one person or another, but for the whole human race. That the things that exist are there to fill the needs of everyone, not just me, not just you, but each person. This does not contradict what Leo XIII talked about in Rerum Novarum. Pius XI goes into detail on that. As Leo had noted, possession, ownership of goods is different than the use of goods. And Pius XI affirms that and develops it more. There's a right to own goods, yes, but that is for the sake of using them for the common good, using them for the needs of all. And if I fail to do that, most especially with the means of production, or when I have more wealth than I really need, then I'm failing to respect that goods have a universal destination, not just a particular one. There's a rooting of this in Genesis. God gave to Adam and Eve dominion over earth, gave all of the things that we have here created for their use. Adam and Eve represent all of humanity because all of humanity in some way is contained in them. We are their children. They represent all of us, not just themselves. God giving dominion to our first parents means that he's giving it to the whole human race. The earth belongs to all of us, and we ought not selfishly keep it just to ourselves. Ownership of property, then, is less of a privilege and more of a duty. If you own property, you have a duty to use it for the good of the whole, not just for your own good. Private property exists in some way as a means to that end, so that you can use it in a generous, intelligent way to help other people. That right to use it like that shouldn't be taken away from you by the government, because that's what perfects us as human beings, to use property in that way. Is it something like Leo would say that you are more careful with your private property because it's yours? Yes, absolutely. And because you're careful with it, it's there and it's developed well to be able to use for the common good. Is private property something that benefits you? Well, yes, but above all, because you use it for something greater than yourself, the common good. In Laborem Exercens, which is one of those encyclicals written on anniversaries of Rerum Novarum in 1981, 50 years after Quadragesimo, he makes a strong claim that the means of production exist to serve labor, so that if you own them, the only legitimate way to own them is to use them with that mindset, that it exists for labor. What does that mean? It exists so that people can have productive jobs in order to support themselves and their families, and also to produce great things. And then it exists for the results of labor, which are those great things going out into circulation in the world, being used. The means of production exist for the sake of labor, not for the sake of your profits, even if you get those secondarily. Here are some examples of the use of property well. To create the opportunity for productive work, Quadragesimo especially emphasizes that. Funding and endowing hospitals, schools, orphanages, places that support the poor, Catholic Charities here in town, for example. The creation of housing for people who do not otherwise have a place to live. All those are kind of big picture for people who have a lot of money, right? You probably don't have a lot of money right now. But it also means giving a coat from your closet to someone who doesn't have one because you've got 3. Or giving shoes that you have because you've got a whole bunch and someone else is walking around barefoot in the cold or with very worn down shoes. Sharing from what you have, because in some real way, what you have that's superfluous, that's there rotting in your closet, belongs to the poor. As we will talk about in the next video, which is going to deal with 2 principles: the preferential option for the poor and subsidiarity, both of which are closely connected to the universal destination of goods. God bless you. Look forward to seeing you soon. Bye now.